says these states have some of the poorest Americans and the highest home ownership rates. That's an attention-grabbing headline, right? Because housing right now, where we live in California, is so expensive. And how is it that there's more people buying houses in poor states than in rich states? Well, this particular person was a realtor in West Virginia and said you can get a house with 90 acres for under $500,000, which is probably a lot for West Virginia. But it's just fascinating to me that we see this. I mean, here's the chart, and I'm going to bring this up if you can see this on your screen. And it says along the y-axis is their average income, and along the x-axis is the percent of home ownership. And if you look on the far right-hand side, near the bottom is West Virginia. And they have a very low income, but a very high home ownership level. And then if you look in the upper left, you see New York and California that have very high income levels, but very low, or relatively low, home ownership rates. Now, what do you think of this? Is this counterintuitive to you? Because I think a lot of people thought that, oh, well, if you move to California and you get a high-paying job, it's going to be a lot easier to buy a house out there because you're going to make more money. Some people think that, and they think that in some of the poorer states, people are going to be so poor that they won't even be able to afford a place to live in. But in fact, the opposite is true. Housing in high income states, in so-called rich states like California, like California and New York, is very, very expensive. And why? Why is this the case? Well, demographics, competition for homes, and strict zoning regulations all play a role in the cost of real estate. And I'm reading this right up from the article. So according to the Federal Reserve data, West Virginia's average personal income of $52,500 per capita is the second lowest in the United States. However, despite its relatively low personal income levels, it has the highest home ownership rate of all 50 states at 77%, according to the U.S. Census data. Mississippi, the only state with a lower average personal income than West Virginia, has the third highest home ownership rate in the country. Now, this to me is interesting because we've often talked about homelessness in San Diego, California, across the United States, and what's the cause of homelessness? Some say it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's financial problems. I mean, there's a bunch of theories. Everyone's kind of got their opinion. But if you really look at the data, the real reason that there's homelessness in California to such a high degree is because housing is so expensive. Even if you want to blame drugs and alcohol and mental health in California as the cause for homelessness, which I agree, those are factors, but they're not the primary. Well, do you think people in West Virginia or Mississippi or some other poorer states do you think there's no homelessness or drug addiction in those other states? Of course there is. There's mental health crises in West Virginia, in Alabama, in Mississippi. The same is true with drug addiction and alcoholism, but there's not a big homelessness problem because housing is a lot less expensive. And I think we lose sight of that here in California. We immediately want, to blame someone else for the price of housing, or we want to elect new leaders in our local city governments, or we want to blame rich, greedy people or corporations or rich people with their vacation homes for the reason why housing prices are so high. But ultimately, it's oftentimes the policies in these high income states that create it. I mean, that's one of the things I comment a lot about in my hometown of Poway, about how regulations and zoning laws that have prevented development from occurring are the reasons why that we have a surging home prices in our community. There's a few other comments from this article that I thought was good. According to Mike Simonson, the founder of the real estate analytics firm Atlas Research, he said, I would have expected that the more wealthy a place is, the more likely that its people can afford a home. It turns out the opposite is true. Now, this is part of their theory to explain this. They said big cities attract people who are in transition or the growth stage of their lives. They're more interested in renting, or they may be more transient. That's certainly true. Many of these cities, such as New York and San Francisco, also attract buyers from across the United States and internationally, bidding up the price of homes. Okay, so you've got a lot more people moving into these big cities. You've got people that maybe aren't necessarily ready to buy yet because they're young professionals just getting their careers started or kind of getting their adult life started. Those play a role. They're inner people, we see a lot of people that are foreign that are purchasing property, even people in the United States moving around buying property. But